Alright everybody, I have been tasked with trying to find some data on sort of, I guess, an argument in the Ford world, and I am not a new generation Ford performance person by any means, so we're deep into the GM high performance market and world, so but boost is boost and horsepower is horsepower and data is data. So we went through and had a customer come to us with an idea that the JLT intakes, and I'll bring up a picture here of one of them, and basically the JLT intake, you can see around where the intake goes through the actual box, there's a big opening, and the thought process there was that the filter was actually going to be restricted through the ram air or through the cold air through the front grille and start to actually pull engine bay heat back through this opening, and it gets quite a bit larger on the bottom. So what we did is we went through and made a filler panel, just 3D printed something up real quick to fill in that gap, and went on a couple drives and got some data, and were kind of surprised by the results. So I figured I'd make this video rather than trying to write out some long post with a bunch of stuff that nobody wants to read. I'll just go through the data and kind of bring up some pictures here and there when they're needed, and kind of be able to explain the data a little bit better on what we found, and kind of go from there. So the first run we did, we actually installed the heat shield first, and we have a 10-minute log here of our first drive time. So as you can see, we've got a lot of just sort of steady state 40-ish to 50-ish mile an hour driving, just kind of letting everything settle in. We logged very few parameters just to kind of keep everything a little cleaner. You can see we've got our intake manifold absolute pressure or boost pressure, engine coolant temp, and then our intake air temp, which is the post blower temperature, and then we've got our ambient air temperature sensor, which or ambient air temp, which is basically read off of this sensor right here. So that's what's going to be reading what's coming in pre-blower, pre-rotor, right after the filter. So as you can see, it's a fairly warm day out. It's reading about 82 pretty much all the way through this whole thing. We got up into the sort of a shady part of the area we were in, so the temperature dropped. So I'd say 80 is probably about an average of what we were running. So, and as you can see, the intake air temp pre-rotor, we're anywhere from we're about 90 here to 88, and then the car was heat soaked. It was sitting for a while in the parking lot, so it took a little while for it, as we were driving, to get it to cool down close to ambient, and that's kind of what we wanted. So we did 2 pulls, and one was in standard street mode, and I believe the other one was in one of the sport or track modes. I can't remember because I don't honestly remember or know what all of these are. So we're going to zoom in here so we can see if we can see. There we go. So this was our first pull here. Obviously you can see we're wide open. We've got basically TPS of 90% all the way through the pull, and you can actually look at the spark curve and actually watch the traction control kick in, because we are on just a regular old street with some decent tires, but again, not a prep track or anything like that. So our boost curve is up here in the pink or the purple, depending on what your screen looks like. And then we have our ambient air temp. Actually, we don't have it here, so I'll have to add that in here.
A few moments later.
There we go. Now we got some data. All right. So as you can see, they're pretty close together, but they during this pull. So right now, the very beginning of the pull, we have about a 11 degree delta variance in the ambient temperature and what's going into the engine post rotor. So and as we do this pull, the ambient temperature basically stays the same, and surprisingly the IATs actually start to drop. So we went from 91 down to about 88 at the end of the pull, so which is pretty good. Keep in mind we're also going from 40 miles an hour to 112, so our cooling capacity through the intercooler up front and all that is getting to be quite a bit more aggressive as that speed goes on. So this is our second pull, and this was done in one of the more aggressive modes. And same thing, so our ambient air temp coming in is about 80. We're down at 86 on the IATs post blower, and through the pull we basically don't gain any temperature. We have a couple degrees here, and then as soon as we start getting up over 100 miles an hour, it goes right back to about 86. So and again, this is with the heat shield installed, and that's keeping theoretically all of the engine bay heat out of the intake box and away from the filter. So now let's open up the other log, if it wants to open. There we go. Without the heat shield. So same thing, it's about an 8-minute log. We didn't log the very first part of our drive just because we were trying to save the battery on the laptop, but same kind of thing, just cruising along 40-50 miles an hour out to the same spot, made a U-turn, and then did 2 pulls. Again, same style, same location, same everything. You can see even the throttle pedal's the same. They're almost the same exact logs once you lay them over each other. So same thing here. Our ambient air temp was right about 80 degrees, but if you notice, our intake air temp is 84. So we're 3 to 4 degrees cooler than where we were before. And as we run through this first pull, we only gain 2 degrees. So we're basically right back to 86, right where we were before, essentially. But our ambient temperature is down a little bit. And then our second pull here, we'll scroll over to our second pull. And same thing, we're 81 on the ambient, and then we're actually cooler, we're at 82 on the intake air post rotor. So and as we do this entire pull, we 84, oops, sorry, we're we never even crack 84 degrees. So we're actually running 2 to 4 degrees cooler on the setup without the heat shield. And everybody's going to say, oh well, that could be, or you're losing the ram air effect because you don't have a sealed box that it's going into, blah 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 blah. And we spent a bunch of time going through and looking at all of the boost curves, or all of the boost KPA values, I guess, essentially, and they all max out at, there's a couple little spikes in here that are like right at 200. And again, we've got traction control kicking in, so obviously that's messing with things a little bit. But between all 4 of these pulls, with and without the heat shield, so we got 198 and a half, 201, 98, I think there's another 200 somewhere right in here, 202. They're all within like 2 or 3 kPa, which in the grand scheme of things is pretty negligible in that realm. And the thought here is, now we've got lower ambient air temperatures, mainly from let me pull up another picture here. There we go. So if we look at the intake design, the grille design, the bumper design, the hood louvers design, and everything else that goes into play with this setup, you've got this large, basically air dam around the cooling stack, right? So the intercooler, the condenser, the radiator, that's keeping a high pressure area of air sort of encapsulated in this section and trying to force it through this little ram air duct. So there's probably not any situations where this would ever become a restriction and actually pull vacuum enough on that intake box to actually pull heat from the engine bay. So the fact that the air is coming into this box with the heat shield installed and sort of stagnating in this box and catching or absorbing the heat from the plastic box that is around the air filter, that's where we're seeing 3 or 4 degrees higher ambient air temperatures versus if we have air constantly flowing through here, through the intake ram air duct into the box, and then also out of the little louver section, because the filter does, it's hard to see, but this little corner goes into the louvers and also the area around the actual filter itself. So as you're driving, as your wheel speed or your miles per hour increase, the amount of air coming in, going into the filter box, and then being pushed out of the filter box is actually helping to cool all of that off from all of the temperature that it's absorbing from being in the engine bay itself. So we thought that the plate would be helpful because we thought that heat was going again from the engine bay into the filter housing, but it was actually doing the opposite effect. It was helping air flush the air box out and keep cooler air in there. Now again, we go back to the argument of, well, we're losing a couple pounds of boost or whatever from the ram air effect or whatnot. There's not enough air that's going to be affected, or enough surface area that's going to act to be a ram air. Sure, if you had a 12 or a 15 inch velocity stack mounted to the front of your bumper in this area, sure, great, it's going to probably do something to that effect. But just the fact that that box is not 100% sealed, it is open to the louvers. Even if you did seal it up 100%, you might see 0.1 psi gain in boost at 140 miles an hour. It's not anything that you're going to see any kind of difference on. And we have more data coming at the track, and we're going to do some back-to-back runs there, see what the IATs are, what the ambients are, what the boosts are, and it's going to be on a prep track with good tires, so we'll be able to actually get hopefully some more data. This is sort of just a preliminary round just to kind of see what we might find. The other thing we might also do is actually put a sort of a piece of paper around this opening with a bunch of slits in it to act like little fingers, and then place a GoPro down in the bottom side of the filter housing with a flashlight, and then actually watch and see which way those fingers move or blow to see if there is in fact air getting sucked in from the engine bay, or if it is just being blown through the ram air inlet and then just going right into the engine bay. So stay tuned for that. That's all I have right now, and if you have any questions, hit up Tim at Mainly Muscle Cars. He's the guy that's been doing all this or going through all this, and I'm helping him out here. But that's all I got for you guys, and we'll catch you next time.